This is lesson 4.4, which is on lines of best fit and scatter plots. And so by the end of this video, I'd like for you to be able to recognize positive, negative, or no correlations in a graph, be able to draw a pretty reasonable line of best fit to represent the data of a scatter plot, be able to determine the difference between interpolating and extrapolating while estimating values by making predictions, and then also applying this to word problems. Okay, so let's just get started. At the bottom left, you'll notice that we have a scatter plot, and it's talking about the age and diameter of oak trees. Okay, so it looks like there's, all the dots there that make it a scatter plot, but there's some sort of a trend because all the data points seem to be lined up almost in a pattern that goes in this direction. Now, we can describe the pattern in different ways. And so another word for pattern is correlation. So correlation just means relationship. Now let's talk about different ways that we can describe a relationship. Number one, we have positive correlations. So a positive correlation means that your data points seem to be going up. So going up towards the right-hand side. All right. Now, negative means kind of the opposite. Instead, as you go towards the right, your data points seem to be going down. So this is called a negative relationship or negative correlation. If you have dots that actually go all over the place, like this one, they don't seem to be in any sort of pattern, do they? So this one is called no correlation. Like, you couldn't even draw an arrow that described the pattern if you wanted to. In addition to the direction of the dots, you also have these additional words. So you can describe not only the pattern as being positive or negative, you can also describe how positive and how negative. Okay, so look at these dots right here. They're going in a positive direction, but the dots don't seem to be very close together. And so we would use the words moderate or weak. And it's really up to you if you want to use the word moderate or if you feel it's weak, it's kind of subjective, so it's your decision. In this case, I would use strong because the dots, even though they're going in a negative direction, they seem to be very close together. So I would use strong. However, if you want, you could use perfect, although I think perfect is more if they're actually in a perfect line. And it looks like some of these dots are a little bit wonky. Okay, so you can use these words to describe how positive or how negative the correlation is. And you wouldn't be using any of those words for the no correlation because you can't have a strong or moderate no correlation. I would just say there's no correlation. All right, now when we start to draw, these lines, so the red lines are the lines of best fit. So you're going to fit the data into a line. And we have 3 criteria to do that. So let's go through the criteria. When you draw that red line, you want to make sure, number one, it follows the trend or the correlation. So it's either positive, negative, or if you don't have a correlation, you wouldn't even draw the line of best fit. The second criteria is make sure you try to join as many dots as possible. Now you're going to draw a straight line. You're not going to join every single dot so that it looks like some weird scribble. Okay, it's just one straight line with a ruler. Now the third criteria is you want to make sure that there's the same number of dots on the top of the line and the bottom of the line. So what that basically means is you're going to try to make the line of best fit in the middle of all of the dots. So let's see how this works. There we go. Okay, so this was our tree example. And you'll notice that as the tree gets older, all the data is going upwards, which means that the diameter is increasing. That should make sense because a little tree might be super, small like that, but then if you have a big tree, then the diameter should be thicker. All right, so let's get rid of all of this for a second. In the middle, you'll see that I have a line of best fit. So that's basically what you're trying to draw, but I just freehanded it. What you really want to do is try to make it a little bit more accurate by following these 3 criteria. Okay, so let's try that out. First criteria, you want to follow the trend of the correlation. So I'm going to be going upwards. So it's a positive correlation. Number 2, want to join as many dots as possible. Okay, so let me see if I can do that, although it's kind of tricky on an iPad. There we go. Okay, so I used a ruler. I joined maybe 1, 2, 3, maybe four dots. Okay. But the third criteria is you want to make sure that red line is in the middle of all the dots by counting how many dots there are at the top and at the bottom of the line. And you want those two numbers to be fairly close together. So all that means is the red line was kind of in the middle of your cloud of dots. So I'm going to say that it's pretty close. Everybody's going to have a different line slightly, and that's okay. It's not a big deal. Now, when you're estimating values, we use two different words, interpolate and extrapolate. So let me show you how this works. When you interpolate, it means that you're asking a question within the data and using the line of best fit to make a prediction. So interpolate means within the data. So for example, I could ask you a question that says, based on your line of best fit, how wide is the tree? So how big is the diameter if it's a 20-year-old tree? So what you would do is you would go to the 20-year-old, so that's where the age is, right? You would go up to the line of best fit, and then you would go across. And you say, oh, okay, so that tree must be about 4, I don't know what they're measuring this in, like 4 feet wide, 4 meters, that seems a little bit big. But anyways, it should be 4 wide, okay? And that question was asked within the data, like 20 is inside this cloud of dots. And so that's what we call interpolating. But if we go into extrapolating, so extrapolating is, let me use a different color, outside the data. So X means outside. So let's ask you a question outside that cloud of data. What about if it's 50 years old? So notice that all of the dots stop about here and there's no graph outside in this area. So I'm asking you a question that's outside all of the data now. So in order to do that, what you have to do is you kind of have to extend your line of best fit so that you can now go all the way up, because there was no line over here at the beginning, right? Remember to use a ruler, guys. And then you would say, okay, that's 10. So a 50-year-old tree would probably have a diameter of 10. And that's outside where all the dots are, and so that's called extrapolating. Okay, now let's try a question based on a real-life example. So it looks like they have the number of bacteria living in a culture at various temperatures. So we have our two variables right here. And since they put temperature at the bottom, we know that that's our independent variable. And then this is going to be our dependent variable. Now that makes sense because obviously the number of bacteria will only survive in certain temperatures. And so its population is going to depend on the temperature. And remember, we always put our dependent here. Okay, so I've plotted all the points down because they've included a scale for me. And I did something like this. At 20 degrees, I'm going to have 12 bacteria. So here's 20 degrees, and then I went up to 12. 12 looks like it's about there. And I put a dot. Oops, sorry. Okay, so our next dot, which is these two, will be 25 degrees. So 25 degrees is probably right about here, because that's 30, 35, and 40, right? So 35, we're going to go all the way up to about 13, right? That's 13, so I'm going to put a dot right there. So that's going to be this coordinate. Now all of these are going to make their own dots, and that's what I have in black all over the graph. Okay, let me get rid of all my blue marks so that you can see everything. There we go. All right, so according to this data, I've drawn a line of best fit that's kind of in the middle, or as in the middle as possible, to all the dots, and it looks like it's going down. So as the temperature increases, it's probably killing all of those bacteria, and so the population is going down. But that's just my prediction. They're going to ask us some questions now. So A asked us to draw the scatter plot, and we did that. B is asking, what type of correlation do you see? Well, again, it's going down, so I'm going to say it's a negative correlation, right? And then how negative? Is it strong or weak? Well, it looks like all of the dots are not super close together in a line, so I'm actually going to say it's probably pretty weak. C is asking what is the dependent variable, and so we know that because it's right over here. The dependent is always along the y. And remember that the bacteria depends on the temperature of its environment. So D is asking, describe the relationship shown by the graph in sentence form. So as the temperature increases, it looks like the bacteria is actually going down. So the bacteria decreases in number. We just want to write that as a very simple sentence. And I usually start with as, and then I would describe what happens. So as the temperature, increases or decreases, the bacteria will increase or decrease. So that's usually how I write my relationship sentence. Now the last question says, how many bacteria are living in a temperature of 35 degrees? Well, let's see, 35, that's 30. So 35 is here. Go up and then go over to the side. It looks like it's about, I said 11. Okay, so 11 would be like over here, 11 bacteria. And since that's inside the data, so it's inside all these dots, that is called interpolating. Okay, now the next one said, what about 95 degrees Celsius? Now, all the dots stop here, so 95 is actually outside of all of the points. 95 is about here, and it looks like I go up until the red line, and then I go across. So it looks like there's only one bacteria. And again, that's going to be called extrapolating. Okay, so I hope that cleared up a lot of the different words and just how we use lines of best fits on scatter plots in order to determine, answers for any application types of questions.